Today on Rise Up, we look into community posts made on the official YouTube channel of the Riser. We then dive into global news, where we discuss important global events taking place worldwide. And finally, we are joined live with Aria Razfar from the University of Illinois. This is Rise Up.
Hello. There you go. It started off with James. James is on Rise Up. Good morning. I'm Irfan Alamgir. Welcome to Rise Up.
Rise up and take courage, and you can do it. That's from the book of Ezra.
Yes.
And it's a beautiful statement.
And yes, Sister Alia is away today, so I've got Brother James in with me. We have a jam-packed show for you today, and we have a very important theme, actually, that's been in the mainstream media for many weeks, many months, and even in the last couple of years, especially on British shores, we've seen the news of people who are fleeing intense persecution,
yes.
Who have left their homelands in extreme desperation, trying to find a safe haven in Europe, risking their lives and really going to extreme measures to be able to provide a better life for themselves and their families.
It's horrific.
And this is a topic that's a very tenuous one politically as well, and it does cause a divide.
It's a geopolitical landscape. You can't avoid the politics.
Yeah.
And it's clear, as we know, that everybody's involved, whether they like to think they're not or they are, because as Aristotle said, the last signs of a dying society truly are tolerance and apathy. And we see a lot of apathy and tolerance to this despair that's hitting home across the world. And it doesn't matter where you go in this geopolitical landscape, whether it is Palestine, whether it is Africa, or South or North America. We see this this massive crisis across borders, across continents. And it's something that is at breaking point. And we've seen how many of these nations previously were actually built primarily by refugees, like Rome and America. You know, fundamentally, their whole ethos was based on refugees who built them coming from different backgrounds, whether it was Abyssinia in Rome, whether it was Middle Easterns or Armenians. They all came together as political exiles to build Rome, and Rome was not built in a day, so it's something that's happened historically.
Yes. Well, like I said, it's a touchy subject, and it's a very divisive subject. We have people who are talking about the limited resources on the planet. We're talking about how there's one side that is saying, look, we worked hard to create this nation of ours through our blood, sweat and tears, through sacrifices, through hard work, and we managed to keep our country relatively stable and create this prospering kind of economy that we have. And now we have these people on the other side who really haven't taken care of themselves nor their countries. They are now reaping the fruits of their own labor, which are obviously not very good. And if they wish to take from our land, then they have to, they have to really earn it. They have to be in a position where they can really come and make a name for themselves through giving, through contributing to the economy of that country. But having this word asylum seeker and refugee, it really does have moral, ethical, as well as religious connotations. And this is something that we are definitely going to unpack throughout the day as we progress. And this is the main topic and theme of the day. But before we launch into this very large and broad topic that, like I said, has been headline news in the last few weeks, we wanted to start off the show firstly by James giving people a brief overview of who we are, why we're here every single morning, and then to launch into some community posts after that. So would you do the honors of just speaking to our audience, assuming that there is somebody watching for the very first time and they're seeing somebody called James and Irfan sitting at a desk with cups that say Rise Up on a satellite channel talking about the Mahdi. What is this whole thing about?
This whole thing is about a mission to realize that the world has fallen into disrepair. that tyranny has taken over on a massive level in politics and religion. And then hence we are claiming and stating very clearly that a man has come forward, just as Jesus came forward, just as Prophet Muhammad came forward, and Abraham and Noah and all the Ulul Azim and most determined ones, in order to enact change and reformation in society. And reformation in society only happens when there is a man who is completely dedicated to that cause and gathers around him companions who are equally dedicated to establish that change on a practical level. And we can have scriptures, we can have books, and they are amazing, and they reveal truths about how humanity should be and how we should put the other before the self. But until we turn that into a practical template, there will be no significant change in life, and that we will remain in despair. And the whole point is about this show and about the essence of this call is it's a chance for the people to realize that it's upon them and upon us together to rise up and to take courage and to do it. And that by doing it as one unit, change happens very quickly and rapidly. And as it says in the Holy Quran, nothing will change unless we change what is in ourselves. So we have to take that stance. We have to be those people. And that is the miracle of this dawah and this call of God today. Just as prophesied that the riser of truth, when he comes forward, he would gather the people like autumn leaves, and they would come from the four corners of the earth. And subhanAllah, we see that on a day-to-day basis now. And that is being metamorphosized not only in word but in deed. And in deed is by going out there on the streets and proclaiming your faith in a way that you can make a difference. And that's what we see today with the missionary works of the brothers and sisters. And whether they are in the Far East, in Thailand, in China even, they are going out there raising the banner. And we saw even in Bangladesh, they took a pole and raised up the flag. You know, they literally raised up the flag and gave bay'ah or pledged allegiance. So what we're saying is, for every nation there is a guide and a banner. And most people in their life, they want to stand proud next to their flag. But if that flag is based on tyrannizing other nations and not respecting one another and not providing justice, why would you want to stand beside that flag?
Yes.
So we're saying this is a flag that really fights against injustice and intolerance and encourages everybody to work as one unit. And I think that's an amazing testimony to this call. And that is a call of Abu Sadiq, from him is peace. And that is a call of his companions and ultimately God, the one true God. And so the fact that people recognize this from all the different nations, as an outsider, as an observer, I would find that intriguing. What is drawing all these people from completely different walks of life, different colors, different creeds, different backgrounds, different levels of education? But they all embrace this call wholeheartedly, and they want to have that miracle manifest. And I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, well, the world is divided, and we are standing at a very important crossroads in history. We are standing on the cusp of the building of the divine just state. This was the mission of every great prophet messenger that came upon this planet. And Brother James talked about the prophet messengers who are very familiar to those of the Abrahamic faiths, who came and established covenants at various points in history. And the ultimate goal of establishing this covenant was actually to gather around enough willing people who bought into the idea that the best person to rule the planet is a man that is chosen by God. Because God is the all-knowing, the all-wise, so it only stands to reason that his choice would be the choice that best serves the needs of his creation. It's quite simple, it's quite logical, it's quite elegant, it's quite beautiful.
It is beautiful,
and the simplicity of this concept is what Abu Sadiq is now talking about or writing about in his various works.
Exactly.
He's a man of action.
But it's not even an alien concept. People believe in the mandate from heaven in the Far East. People believe in the divine right of kings in Europe. And that was something that was professed by the French and the British in the past. So the idea of divine monarchy is not alien to the people. It's just something that has been obscured and obliterated through history.
Exactly. And, we're in the West, and a lot of the European monarchies that you're talking about, all of their idea about who should be king came from the Bible. The appointment of Adam as a king over the earth, essentially, is what it states in Genesis, where he's given dominion over all creatures on the land, in the sea, and in the air. And this is where the concept of divine right of kings comes from. And all monarchs that followed in the years after Christ claimed their right to rule in the name of Jesus, or in the name of God through Jesus Christ.
Exactly.
And like you mentioned, James, this is a pan-cultural phenomenon. This is something that goes into the east, into the north, south, and west. It's everywhere. The idea that there is an all-knowing being who is actually very concerned with the needs of his creation and sends them an individual from their species, in this case mankind, on planet Earth, who speaks the will of God to the people and governs their affairs. And Abba Sadiq is the person who is doing it in this time, just as Jesus was supposed to be doing this job 2,000 years ago, and the job that was taken over by the Prophet Muhammad and the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt 1400 years ago, when he first emerged with the message of Islam. So we are now in 2025. We have a man who is claiming to be the Muhammad, the Jesus, the Moses of this day and age. He says his name is Abdullah, and that he was mentioned by name by his predecessor, the Prophet Muhammad, just as the Prophet Muhammad claimed to be the man mentioned by Jesus Christ when we referred to the Paraclete. And in the Quran, it then extended into the name of Ahmad. And actually, the Prophet Muhammad said that Jesus mentioned him by name. And it's interesting that the name Muhammad is not found in the Gospels. But isn't it also interesting that in the Gospels, Jesus says, Moses spoke about me.
Exactly. But
you
know,
you reject me. And yet, in the Old Testament, there is really no mention of a Messiah by the name of Yeshua who will come. There are indications to his coming, and there are mentions that allude to his coming, for example, famously in the scrolls of Isaiah, but the name Yeshua is not there, and yet Jesus said he was mentioned by Moses. So it's interesting that this seems to be the item that the non-working scholars and those who oppose this concept of God's right to rule through a man that he appointed is something that is foremost on the agenda of those who wish to suppress the word of God in every day.
What's funny about it is they claim that, yet they use that same system themselves to proclaim who the next one should be. So like we know, after Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, did declare Ali alayhi salam as his successor in Ghadir Qum, we know then that the successors themselves, who stole those rights, usurpers, would use succession as a basis of who should be next. And Abu Bakr would declare it was Umar, and then today they create this whole concept of Wilaya Faqih, or the rule of the jurisprudent and the science of men, to indicate who the next successor should be. But it's ultimately a successor that isn't proclaimed by God. So, you know, as Abba Sadiq would say in his videos, if you're not claimed by God, if you're not mentioned by God, I don't want to hear about it. You know, if it's not God that's foretelling who should be the successor, then I don't want to hear about it. But even, you know, we know the whole Catholic Church, they use this as the basis of their system, don't they, is divine succession. But at first, as we know, it was Jesus, and he handed over the light to Simon Peter, and it's proclaimed in the Bible, you know, what you bind in heaven, you bind on earth, and he gave him that right. And the Catholic Church recognized this initially, but then they created their own system which encouraged an enclave of people to form an election. And it's an elective process in the end, not based on God's rulership when the cardinals come together and they make a decision. That was never how it was ordained by God. So there's a clear usurpation once the messenger's not alive. And we see that history repeats like this. Once the messenger dies, initially they might accept the successor, but ultimately within just a generation or two there will be a deviation that forces some form of shura, and we know that the Prophet Muhammad said, woe to my nation for the shura to usurp the rights of my brother after my death, and woe to my nation from the smaller shura in the end of times, meaning in Baghdad, in Zawra, to usurp the rights. And my system, which is basically, the system is the sunnah of God, which is the divine succession. And this is what has happened time and time again, and Prophet Muhammad warned explicitly about this consultation process that was going to take place in the wake of his death. So he knew, very eloquently that this was going to happen. That they would usurp his rights, and this whole concept of this consultative process is very dangerous.
Exactly, and it's important to really re-emphasize and repeat these truths, because they have happened very recently. They've been happening throughout prehistory and going back all the way to the first man, Adam, and the succession process that followed after him. So that is the call in a nutshell, really, for those people who are interested, who are tuning in, who are watching, who are looking for answers in this day and age. And the really good news is that after 10 years of Abdullah Hashim Aba as-Sadiq, the man who is entrusted with God to establish the seventh covenant with mankind, people are paying attention. The call is spreading very quickly to all four corners of the earth. We've seen countries from east to west raising up the banner upon which is written allegiances to God, or al-Bay'a lillah. And this is something that we love to celebrate on the show. On Rise Up, we often begin the show after giving a brief introduction of who we are, to go into celebrating the people who are waking up to the news of the arrival of the Jesus of the time, the Mahdi that the Prophet Muhammad promised, that individual who does God's will on earth as it is in heaven. And there are many people, James, around the world who are now spreading the word and becoming the apostles, or like the apostles of Christ.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as well. And Jesus said, he would send them out 2 by 2. And he started with 12, then he sent 72, and he said, you go ahead of me. Meaning that Jesus was an itinerant preacher. He did go out onto different streets, different cities, and the mission was to say, go out there. 2 by 2, 12, 72, 313, 10,000, 144,000. It's just this rippling out effect. And we feel it now in the energy with these people coming, that it is that ripple out effect now.
Yes, the people are really taking to the streets, and we've seen some amazing, innovative examples of the way that the call is being spread through various means and methods, using modern technology. For example, in Malaysia, to distribute through drones,
that's incredible.
Leaflets talking about the arrival of the Mahdi during Ramadan as people break their fast. So people are coming up with very new, ingenious ways to spread the call.
Billboards in shopping malls and that kind of thing, which is incredible. We've seen that in Australia now, in Adelaide,
in Tokyo.
Where's next? Piccadilly Circus? I don't know.
We've seen everything. The call is spreading very quickly. And let's go to our first segment, which is to celebrate the cause by looking at some of the community posts that are looking at the Ansar around the world who are spreading the call. Now, let's see which country is up next on the dais. Spain, I believe.
In Spain, Zaragoza, I think it was, wasn't it?
Yes. Let's see the first post there. So James, this is somebody who is called Muhammad, and he is in the Spanish town or city of Zaragoza.
Zaragoza, yeah.
Yep, and hopefully pronounce it properly. And in Spain with his daughter Zara, and he is spreading news. You can see he's holding up there a poster that he is speaking to somebody about in Spain, and there's a picture of Imam Ahmad al-Hassan on the left and Abu Sadiq on the right, and he is giving the glad tidings of the appearance of the Savior of mankind. It's not a small topic, but there he is on the streets spreading the word.
What you have been promised has arrived, and we see, it's all generations, it's all walks of life, and we see sometimes it's in rundown areas, sometimes it's in affluent areas.
That's his young daughter, Zara, no doubt.
And she's obviously having faith as well, and it's lovely when you see the families coming together into the dawah. And as you say, they meet people on the streets, they engage with them, as we all have done at some point on our journey. We've met these people on the streets, and we find people curious, and some of them, they do investigate and they do embrace the call as soon as they are able to find that there is a man who is encouraging a new way and a good way for the people. And there he is again.
You can see our brother Muhammad is there on the streets, and he's finding the most visible kind of areas that he is putting up these posters and flyers, and it really is a great message. It is the most important message in the world right now to be talking about. There we go on a notice board, looking like on one of the streets next to a cafe. As people are sitting, there is a message telling them that the Mahdi is here. He has arrived, and he is here to save mankind. But we need people to Pledge allegiance.
Yeah, and clearly we see that this message is hitting home across Europe, across Asia, all the continents. It's really incredible, and that's a testimony to the fact that this is the Qaim of the family of Muhammad, because it was prophesied that he would bring together people from all walks of life and backgrounds.
Yeah, no, that was beautiful to see the message spreading in Spain, the city of Zaragoza. Our brother Muhammad and his daughter Zara, thank you so much for your works, and these works will not go unrewarded. And inshallah, there's one person walking on the streets who can look at these posters and find the Mahdi.
Yeah, Abu Sadiq did say, didn't he, whoever it's intended for, it shall reach. In other words, God knows who's going to be reading that message and who will adhere and accept that message.
Yes.
There are people out there who will and do.
Exactly. So thank you very much there, Brother Muhammad. And let's see what's up next. Where are we going? Let's spin the globe and see where we land.
Yeah.
Is it going to be South America? I think it's somewhere in South America. Let's see what we have lined up next. So this is also recognized by Abu Sadiq on the community post on the Mahdi Has Appeared YouTube channel. And here we have James' sister Virginia and her daughter from Chile.
These little angels made sure the truth was heard in Chile. So probably that's in Santiago, the capital, perhaps. But wherever it is, it doesn't matter so much as they're getting the message out there. And it seemed these are like Jesus's people. They're itinerant. They're going from city to city in many cases in order that all these places get to hear the message. And it looks very urbanized there. So downtown, where there'll be many footfall of commuters and travelers and holiday makers who will be able to see that there is a messenger. There's a QR code. People just literally need to scan that. And I know this is a very sweet, beautiful girl. And Abu Sadiq said in the past that these people have, up syndrome. So these are people that are very beautiful, and they are sent by God and proclaim the message in a very beautiful way. And I think that's a very special thing to see.
It's a very special thing to see, and you can see the handing over of El Manifesto del Mahdi in Spanish there to a gentleman who is working in a restaurant, looks like. And this is it. This is the works. Now look at this globe-trotting. We're jumping now from Spain to Chile with Ansar all over the world, spreading the word of God in their native tongues to the people of their land. And this is what it's all about.
And yet,
this
10 years ago, brother,
this is the work
just
that really counts.
Number of people. This is what's amazing, isn't it? 10 years ago, it was just a small group in a back room in Egypt, and now you have this global revolution.
Truly is a global revolution, and thank you so much to the Ansar in Chile who are spreading the word in this land in South America. So we're jumping from one continent to the other, and let's see where we're going next. Let's spin the globe.
Yeah, I'm getting spun around with this now. We're getting dizzy with all this different nations and different locations. And subhanAllah, this is a good friend of some of our companions that we have in the community. This is brother Muhammad Amin, who goes out with his father, spreading the call. This isn't the first time he's been doing this. He does this in Belgrade. There's been a lot of demonstrations, I think, lately in Serbia connected to Turkey. This is a nation and this is an area of the world which is deeply atheistic generally.
Yeah, well, it's become atheistic in more modern times.
Over modern times. I mean, obviously, historically...
You could see in the background there of that first picture, if you go back, it's a very... if you just go back there, you can see there's a crucifix there.
Exactly.
And there is the lookalike on the cross, as we would say.
Yeah, the lookalike.
So it's a very important and pertinent picture. And there we go, again, in the language of the people, with that famous QR code that takes people directly to the YouTube channel of the riser of the family of Muhammad, the promised Mahdi that Prophet Muhammad spoke about so extensively in the narrations of the Muslims. And there we go. The brother Muhammad is now plastering onto the wall there. Imam Mahdi has arrived, and this is the news, the most important news, and it's being delivered by a person who is not native to the land, but who has found refuge in a land that opened its doors, and now he is returning the favor by giving them the greatest of glad tidings. That's
the beauty of this refugee movement, is it enables people that are believers in God, and often they are, many of the refugees, they are the wayfarers, the abandoned and the rejected often of their original societies, but when they do travel and they find faith, just like the apostles of Jesus, their only goal and mission, irrespective of the reaction that they receive, Whether it's a blessing or a curse, they will continue to be messengers. And that is the duty of a messenger.
Yes. So that's our community post section completed, and we celebrated Ansar in Spain, then we went to Chile, and then we went to Eastern Europe, where the brothers and sisters are spreading the call of God by telling people that for those people who are downtrodden, the marginalized, for them, God has sent in His infinite grace and mercy a man to help them in their moment of darkness. All they have to do is recognize Him, see the proofs that He comes with, see the fact that they align with all the previous prophets and messengers that were sent on this planet, and then give Him their utmost support to establish the divine just state. So it's a fairly simple, clear message, not much complexity to it. And this is the way of God. No. This is the way of God. Not in essence.
In essence, the message of God is always very simple, and it's available for everybody to understand. Otherwise, God would not be just, and God forbid that we would claim that.
Yeah.
So the message is always very transparent, very clear. And the people that are upholding the message, especially in the early phases, in the early phase of this appearance and emergence, are the ones that are generally regarded as wayfarers, and like the people of Noah, who are regarded as the lowest amongst the people, who are regarded as the most weak. But ultimately, that is how God wills it. That is how God raises His mission. Just like Moses, when he went to the Pharaoh, and they said, "But you are wearing the most poor of clothes. You are not speaking even eloquently. How can you be a messenger from God? How can you be sent by God?" But ultimately, that is not for us to decide. And God knows what's in the hearts. And God chose Moses to go back to the people and to take them out of Egypt, despite their tyrannizing after the Israelites were abandoned by themselves by rejecting the messengers, and they were forced to be in slavery in Egypt, and they were forced into economic slavery and basically unable to look after themselves properly. God sent them a messenger, and with faith they were able to get out of Egypt and to travel and to go into the wilderness. And this was a great exodus of refugees. And Moses himself in the beginning was a fugitive, or regarded as such, wasn't he? Yeah. When he killed the Egyptian. And so he was likewise an itinerant who was forced to leave his homeland and became a refugee in the wilderness. So for 40 years. So this is a sunnah of the prophets and messengers, just
yes.
like Joseph as well.
Yes, this is a very important topic, and actually the last time we were here, when Ali and I were doing the show, we were talking about another very important topic, which was the subject of abortion and the place it occupies in society, how our moral values have shifted over time, and how we view abortion in this day and age versus what are the ethical and moral foundations of our understanding, which comes principally through religion, have changed. And it was a very fascinating topic. And this is the thing about the riser of the family of Muhammad and the Mahdi, that he tackles the most tenuous of issues. And he gives clear responses based on evidence from narrations and scripture, and then he is able to help people to really come to this understanding. People who, like in the case of the abortion episode that was very recently released on the Mehdi Has Appeared YouTube channel, where an individual messaged in and asked the question that, will she ever be forgiven for committing or partaking in this action that is deemed in the religion to be an act that is tantamount to one of the greatest sins, because you are ending ending the life of a fetus before it has a chance to become an independent being. And it was a very fascinating episode. It's definitely worth watching. We covered certain aspects of it, but the point I'm making is that this is a topic that many scholars of religion will run away from. And when they do decide to dabble in it and answer questions concerning it, it is usually just incredibly murky and unclear, whereas Abbas Sadiq makes it abundantly clear where and when abortion is permissible, where and when it is not, and here are the reasons for it, and here is the precedent for it. And he gives it all packaged in a very easy to follow step-by-step order, that can make this matter clear for the people.
Yes.
And certainly something that is worth talking about and discussing, and actually opens up a lot of other questions, where what is the meaning of life, and when life begins, and how do we overcome this thing that we're told that we will never be forgiven, and God is full of mercy.
But that's a good point you mentioned, that God, many people think they cannot be forgiven, therefore they cannot come to God. And it seems that way. I always remember when I was studying religion back in Malaysia in the day, and I would go to the masjid, and I was into Islam and I'd accepted Islam, but when strangers were coming, strangers or travelers, and they seemed lost, because many people today, especially in the West, the affluent West, they have a lot of money, and they don't even need to work sometimes, but they feel lost even though they have everything in the apparent, in the material world. So they end up traveling, and then they're curious. Oh, I'm in Kuala Lumpur, let me go and visit this masjid. They go inside the masjid, they meet a guy who claims to be the imam of this establishment, and then he shows them a video, and I'm standing next to the individual, and the video is showing you a blazing hellfire, and he's saying, this is where you're going. And I'm like, wow, is that how you're treating these itinerant travelers? And it just made me realize that really we have gone so far astray in our religion when we treat the outsider like that, and we treat them with brimstone and fire. And it's the whole principle of saying, well, you've gone so far astray, you've sinned so much, there's no hope for you anymore.
Yes.
And so people feel abandoned, like you say, and it's the same when Abba Sadiq talked about prostitution.
Yeah.
And we had the similar concept where this dear lady had obviously felt abandoned. She was living in Iran, which is a nation which has taken upon itself to allow this concept where muta, which is temporary marriage, which in its original form, as proclaimed by the family of Muhammad, had certain merits based on strict principles, had become a methodology to allow for something called virtually halal prostitution, where so-called scholars of a religion would arrange marriages for very small prices. Well, actually, they take a big cut as a pimp, basically, for allowing a man to have a relationship with a girl for virtually an hour, if you want, or 24 hours. And then obviously these women become chantel for these pimps, and they're forced to do this virtually just to survive or to put food on the table. This is disgusting, and this is what Abba Sadiq's doing time and time again. He's saying that these people's sins are forgiven when they enter into the covenant of God, and I think that's a very beautiful thing.
Yeah, well, there you go. I think these subjects are difficult, aren't they? And this is something that the scholars of religion in this day and age have perverted the true understanding of religion, and therefore we see all of this suffering that is being perpetrated and being suffered by the people. I mean, there is so much out there, James, and we've spoken about now the abortion crisis and how we're talking about this muta, which is a temporary marriage, another religious concept that has been perverted. And now I think we come to the hot topic of the day, which is the topic of the treatment of those fleeing persecution and seeking refuge in saving their lives, in living lives of dignity. Now, we've all seen the images. We've seen people do anything within their power, risking it all in order to have a chance of a better life. And there has been a very distinct attitudinal shift towards the asylum seeker. In fact, the word asylum seeker suddenly evokes images and emotions in the hearts and minds of the people because of this shift in attitude that has happened, particularly over the last, I'd say, 50 odd years.
Negative connotations now, as opposed to in the past where, people were saying, great, we're bringing in people who've got skills, they can help boost our economy, they can help society, they can be a great contribution. And we had that in the UK with the Pakistanis and Indian people when they came, and the Caribbean people, they came and they helped society, they boosted society. But for some reason now, it seems that the attitude has changed.
Well, here's the thing now, these are economic migrants you're talking about.
Yes.
Right? You're talking about people that are selected for their training, for their skill set, in order to serve their new adopted country's best interests.
True.
But this is a worldly concern. What I'm talking about is people who have nothing, abject poverty. They're being murdered, tortured, raped, maimed, killed, drowned. etc. This is providing refuge to those people who are the most vulnerable people on the face of this planet, who have no place where they can live in dignity and peace and security, who are just seeking a way of life that has some semblance of normalcy.
Yeah,
okay, this is what we're really focused on.
Yeah, I mean, like in Syria today with the Alawites being tortured and literally beheaded in many cases, and they don't have a place to lay a head at night in peace, you know, and their children are forced to watch these slaughters take place. And it's happening to the Christians as well, many people in this country. And that's just one example.
Yeah, and it's happening to the members of our religion.
It's happening
and this
to
is
the
why,
members of our religion.
And it's happening so frequently that we have now we've certainly done it for the last few days, but we've had Sister Hadil coming in talking about human rights violations against members of this faith. And of course, we don't have to go too far back in history to find one of the darkest chapters in human history, which was when silent indifference led to the killing of over 6 million people, predominantly Jewish people in Europe, but also other minorities, other religious and ethnic minorities. And this term that we now hear so often, ethnic cleansing, is now really a resurgent term. It's coming back.
Yes.
And again, you don't have to look so far, and the examples are plenty. We've had the treatment of the Rohingya in Myanmar, a country that has recently been struck with devastating earthquakes.
That's true.
We've heard about the persecution of minorities in Pakistan, in Nigeria. You know, severe and brutal cases of Boko Haram cases, etc.
In the Philippines, you have these cases of Abu Saif as well. That's just a small smattering.
Yeah, this is just the very tip of an enormous iceberg of oppression that exists with respect to the treatment of these religious and ethnic minorities. And when you see some of these scenes that we're about to show you, you know, it should really raise in the minds of every sentient human being that has a conscience the question, what kind of horrific conditions must exist in their homeland to make them take such risks?
Exactly. With their children as well.
Right.
Their wives and their children. It's not just men going for, as I said in the beginning, economic migration. These are people that are taking their houses on their backs, which is just their few final possessions with their children, and fleeing in desperation.
Okay, wow. I think we have a phone call coming in. That's actually very good timing, because I was just about to launch into the images that we had that describe what we're talking about. But let's take the call from Brother Zygmunt from Poland. Welcome to the show, Riza, Brother Zygmunt.
Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, brothers.
Wa alaikum salam. It's good to hear from you once more, Zygmunt.
Indeed, it is.
So I'm glad that I can be at this show and to talk about the refugee crisis.
Yes.
And what is going on right now.
We just started the segment. Good timing.
Yeah.
So I wanted to emphasize that right now we are living in times that the term refugee is sometimes taken as the economic migrant. Some people just don't even see the difference between these two terms. Like, this is a big point. Like, if someone tells someone that they want to make a refugee country, for example, to help refugees, some people don't even recognize the thing that these people are really going away from persecution, and they see them as just economic migrants. So this is a thing that is happening right now. And in Poland, there was luckily a situation when over 1.5 million refugees from Ukraine were having asylum in Poland. Right now, they're having asylum in Poland. Over 1.5 Ukrainians who were going away from war. Yeah, they were facing persecutions there, and they took it. Both, like the government of Poland took it. And there was this great movement. People were helping them, despite there are like historical bad blood between these two countries, and despite that the government of Ukraine is basically glorifying based Nazis, but they took them anyway, because these people have like they are running from war.
Yes.
So this is one thing, that over 1.5 million refugees were taken. But now what I found out that shocked me, on the Polish-Belarusian border, the government of Poland said that there will be no asylum for anybody for 60 days. Why? Because they claim that the immigrants are basically, and the refugees, they are dangerous for the society, and they are basically sent by Putin because they want to destabilize the Polish country. So right now we have a situation when over 1.5 million people from country that is like historically not friendly, but they are taken, and people who have nothing to do like with any bad intentions cannot go to Poland, because basically they are from Middle East or something. So, right, this is the government of the end times. Like, come on, like this is very disturbing. And it shouldn't be like
it's a bit like double standards as well, like it's one rule for one and it's one rule for another. Like we're allowing migrants from Europe, but we won't allow Middle Eastern migrants because they might have a different religious creed to us, as opposed to the fact that they're both being prejudiced and marginalised in their own country, and they both have a right to refuge. Refuge should not be based on prejudice. It doesn't work like that, does it? You can't have refugees where you're saying, coming from Middle Eastern nations, we're not going to accept them in because they might have a different religious background and cause discomfort to our local people. But Ukrainians who profess to be Christians, well, we'll let them in our country, as they'll be more likely to amalgamate. I mean, there's many reasons why they make these statements, but they are not just. They are not based on justice, which is what we must realise, and then we have to eradicate these governments from that attitude. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, this just shows who people are choosing to be their leaders, that they are basically people that should basically make more wise decisions. But we know how it is in the government. Like, there are a lot of things happening, like
you know what I found,
people telling that
Sigmund, you know what I found really interesting about what you said is this kind of the term. Now, before, when Judeo-Christian principles were very much alive in Europe and people had this sense of empathy for the suffering of another, the term renegade, refugee, asylum seeker, all of these things, they used to conjure up images of suffering human beings who really had nothing going for them. And this idea was that through spirituality, this hope for hospitality would be alive in the hearts of a country that would be willing to open its borders and its compassion towards these people. But now you hear the word refugee or asylum seeker, and the first image that comes in to your mind is that of a mosquito that feeds off the carcass or the body of its hosting nation, spreading disease and plague and suffering into the home country. Exactly. And therefore people have completely shifted in their approach towards this whole issue that is such a big issue. And like you mentioned, in Poland, to accept over 1 million people fleeing war in Ukraine, you're saying that, well, they did open their borders because they consider the Ukrainians to be less likely to affect the culture of the land of Poland, because we have, basically Caucasian people who have the same religion versus those people fleeing war and persecution, for instance, from the Middle East. So there are double standards, but there are also, as you pointed out, this whole idea of seeing the foreigner as a pathogen, as something that causes disease and poverty and lack in the home nation, is something that has really become a recent phenomenon. And it's a very interesting question that you raised. And we also, we have Professor Razfar coming in towards the end of the show today to talk to us about what caused this change. How was this done? How was this propaganda played out, where this shift in the image of the refugee and asylum seeker changed in the hearts and minds of the people? And I think we already highlighted a couple of those things, but again, we really appreciate you calling in and sharing this. And I think this is a matter very dear to Brother Zygmunt's heart.
It is, and I was thinking as well, because these are fundamentally Poland, Ukraine. If you go back in history, they're very strong Christian nations fundamentally, and they would always proclaim the message of Jesus of, when I'm hungry, did you feed me? When I was thirsty, did you give me to drink? When I needed a place to sleep, did you give me accommodation? And this is the whole point of Jesus' religion. And people have forgotten that. It's basically, do as to the neighbours you had done unto yourself. And if people can't uphold this basic principle, then where is the foundation of their religion now? Where's their foundation of their humanity? Because humanity before religion.
Yes.
But Jesus' message was always that.
Very much so. And I think, Brother Zygmunt, I think the next segment that's coming up is going to be very interesting to you, because it really does speak about this concept that it takes a real tragedy, it seems, to wake up mankind from its slumber from a moral point of view. And this is certainly a moral issue, a hot topic of the day. So thank you so much for your call. If you have anything further to say, please go ahead. But again, we always welcome you on the show as a long-standing supporter of Rise Up, and a person who's clearly very passionate about human rights, in particular also for the rights of the refugee and asylum seeker.
Thank you very much. I wanted also to add that the capitalist mentality really doesn't help in this human mentality to just help people who are coming from different countries, because we have, the people are then thinking, the prices will go up and stuff.
I think the media stokes this up quite a bit in the press. They'll start saying, "Oh, look at the cost to the the country, because then we've got to house them, we've got to feed them," as if they're virtually animals that can't help themselves. But these people, many of them are well-trained, skilled people, and given the right opportunity, they can do so much as well to actually support and boost that nation. Yet most of them are then cast into jobs that are backbreaking, that no one else wants to do, and they're not given their rights, basically.
How many migrant movements have saved economic collapse in the hosting nations?
Exactly.
This is the other question. I think capitalists also have this form of amnesia where they forget who created the conditions, economic and political, in the homelands of these people that caused them then to run for their lives.
That's critical.
And this is also another point that we have to consider.
The wars in the Middle East.
That this is not a mutually exclusive problem. The world is a globalized world. There is an interconnection of countries economically, politically, and the decisions of the richer countries often dictates the conditions in the poorer countries, and we have seen many examples of this. I don't want to get into a long talk about this, but I think everybody knows how the IMF has crippled many emerging economies in Africa and Asia for generations to come by giving loans to completely untrustworthy leaders and individuals and institutions. So it's a really important topic, and I wanted to really focus in. By the way, thank you, Brother Zygmunt, for calling in.
Thank you,
we're going to launch into our next segment before Professor Razfar appears, and I think you'll really enjoy it, because it paints quite although it paints a horrible picture, it is this tragedy. This out of the ashes emerges the truth. And there was a big tragedy that happened actually in November of 2021, one of the biggest loss of lives coming from those people who were fleeing and trying to find a home for themselves in the United Kingdom, when a rubber dinghy, James, completely capsized, killing everybody on board except 2, and over 30 people, I believe, lost their lives.
That's right.
And it created this huge investigation in the UK.
60 people died, didn't they, in the end? Was it?
No, I think we've also had these instances in the Mediterranean where we're now focusing in on how these people transport from one location to another in hopes that they will find a safe haven. And yes, this has been happening particularly in those fleeing persecution from North Africa and the Middle East, in the Mediterranean, but also in the English Channel between France and England. But let's bring up the first image of this particular segment, which talks about the Mediterranean capsizing and drowning of people. So this one is...
Yeah, that's the one I was talking about. Yeah, 60 migrants dying in the dinghy in the Mediterranean. And once again, it's these dinghies. I mean, these are not vessels. These are not vessels that are suitable for channels. They're not suitable for oceans and seas. These are things that are used in a small lake predominantly. I mean, you wouldn't be using these in vast oceans when the waters get choppy, especially when you're overloading these vessels. It shouldn't be allowed to happen. These are rich nations as well that they're transporting between. Civilized nations that should have suitable systems in place to observe and monitor this and to prevent it from getting out of control. They have decent helicopters, lifeguards, they have all the necessary nous and equipment to ensure 100% that these incidents, if they do even take place, are dealt with very promptly, and no one is able to be a fatality as a result of that. It's just insane.
It is really scary that people are willing to get aboard these boats, which are made from rubber, as James said, that are only suitable for a small lake at best. Oftentimes not even with life vests, because the people who run these cartels and businesses who sell this idea to people that these are safe means of travel and passage to a better life, it's really quite horrendous. And the people actually know. They're not, I mean, people can tell when they look at one of these vessels that this is something that is incredibly risky. And they've heard the news. They know that people often drown and lose their lives. Women clutching onto their children as they're crying out for help.
But they're desperate, as you say it. As Irfan was saying earlier, these people have reached rock bottom. They're below rock bottom. You know, they're desperate people, and they'll go to any lengths to try and find a better life because their life is so hellish where they're coming from because of the political or religious oppression. Starvation, whatever it might be. And so it's not like, they're going to weigh it up in their minds. They're just going to get on that vessel, whatever it is. Even if there are holes in it, they'll get on it because they know that going back is worse than death virtually. And that's when you know that the world is in despair and the moral dilemma has reached catastrophic levels, that people are willing to make those decisions for their own children.
Yes, and we've seen this in the mainstream media, like I said before, on plenty of occasions, these overloaded dinghies. And if we go back to some of these images, you can see how many people are loaded onto each of these makeshift boats to navigate through to these large seas, like you said, bodies of water for which they're completely inept. And you can see there probably close to 60 people perhaps who have been squished on board this little rubber boat.
Even when animals are going to slaughter, forgive me for saying.
Is there any surprise how these...
I mean, look at it capsizing. What do you expect? Animals, when they're going to slaughter, they are less packed than that. Yes. When you see animals going to market, they're less packed than that.
And you can see there is a certain proportion of people who have these life vests on. There are certain people who don't.
Yeah, well, probably they paid a little bit more money. So, you know, their life is worth more if they pay more money to the smugglers.
And for those people who have been retrieved, who drowned and died, they actually found that these life vests that they're wearing are actually completely substandard. Yes, they barely stay afloat by themselves, let alone
shockingly. Then, if their boat does capsize, how long are they going to be in the water? You know, how long are they going to be in the water before they even receive any help? Despite the fact that the channel between England and France is actually only a small distance. I think it's less than 40 miles. So how is it not that they can patrol that area very easily? And the Coast Guard would have full awareness through their data, through the coordinates, that there is a vessel out there.
Yes.
And it shouldn't require analysis of who's in the boat.
And you can see from this image, James, that this is one of the ships that actually made it safely. Actually, the number of crossings that we're talking about now, let's move on from by the way, in the Mediterranean, over 2,000 people lost their lives in 2023 alone. 2,000 people drowned. Some of the bodies have yet to emerge. These are estimates, best estimates that we have from the bodies that have been recovered, and based on estimates of how many people have been crammed onto these little dinghies. There was the last image there which showed one of these boats successfully making it, actually crossing the English-French Channel, that small body of water between these two nations, which has become recently extremely active. People are using this to arrive on British shores and see if they can find a better life for themselves and their family.
It feels like they really are treated like second-class citizens, or they're not treated like human beings almost. You know, when you hear about a natural disaster, or you hear about a disaster which is connected to like a ferry disaster with Westerners, it's headline news. You know, there's a massive investigation and inquiry going into that event, and normally the lifeguard is sending out other vessels and helicopters in a flash. But when it seems to be involving refugees and asylum seekers and illegal aliens, or whatever you want to call people like this, human beings like you and me, we bleed the same, we cry the same, and we feel the same. I mean, at the end of the day, whoever it is going to feel absolutely petrified in that vessel. I don't care who they are, what kind of background they come from, whether they think they're strong. As soon as they're facing those high waves, they are going to feel petrified and feel inadequate. And that is a feeling no one deserves to feel. No one should have to feel like that. And there are ways and means to negotiate, to organise these things, but the governments are not able to sit down at a table, it seems, and come up with a strategy to help these people. And so these situations continue to happen, whichever government is in charge, whether it's whatever type of government, and that's a sign that it's not working. Yeah,
and actually, this is where the next report comes in. Which was the deaths of almost 30 people on a attempted channel crossing that happened. And this is the report that we're talking about, James.
The Cranston report, is it?
The Cranston report, exactly. And this is something that highlighted how dangerous and how serious the issue is. Stereotyping a factor in the loss of life in the deadliest channel crossing, the inquiry told. Migrant dinghy was also confused with vessel from which 35 people were rescued. So incident was marked as resolved. So there's another vessel that almost capsizes with 35 people who are saved on the same night. So you can imagine the frequency of the travels that are happening on these rubber dinghies. Yes. But this particular one did capsize, and it launched this huge report because it was such a big human tragedy. There were a lot of women and children aboard who lost their lives, who drowned in the freezing November waters of the English Channel, and no one came for help. It's a small body of water compared to the Mediterranean Sea.
It's a tiny body of water in comparison.
No one came, and really some shocking things happened and have been uncovered by this investigation. So let's keep going on the next slide, and we'll then come to some of the main points that happened. So it says many victims of the Channel dinghy tragedy could have been saved. The lawyers say many of the 27 people who drowned in 2021 might have survived if rescue services had searched for longer, the inquiry says.
I mean, how can they limit the time to help the people? How can they limit the time for the rescue until they're categorically clear that it's been resolved?
So the Professor Cranston, who headed off this investigation, he did say that it is possible, even at those temperatures that were present on that night, for bodies to have survived for at least 4 hours after the ship capsized, provided they were wearing these life jackets, which some of them were, and yet the efforts that went anywhere near that amount of time.
Well, that's it. And I'm saying, critically again, if there was a ferry disaster, a regular ferry disaster, P&O, whoever it is, for sure they'd be out there until they'd exhausted to the last breath. And every piece of wood would have been picked up. Yeah. But when it's an asylum boat, it seems, they're cutting corners.
Yes.
They're not taking it as seriously as they should do, because in their hearts, perhaps, they're not thinking of these people as human beings like themselves. It's very sad, but it is the reality, and that's how we have gone down, and apathy has taken over, and tolerance for these incidents is existing. People are tolerant to this scenario, and we cannot be tolerant to the suffering of others irrespective of their nation or background.
Exactly. And if we continue to read, continue to go through those slides that we have about this Cranston inquiry of this dinghy that capsized in 2021 that killed so many people, we will learn some other shocking truths. Do we have any more? There we go. So this is, of course, the mourning family of those people who drowned on the French side. So these were people who were going from France into the UK, and they never made it to their destination. And these are their faces and pictures. You can see the young people in the prime of their life who lost their lives, and there were many children as well as women on board.
But it's like you say as well, that these people are that desperate to make this crossing. I mean, they're coming from France, they're coming from a so-called civilized nation, and they're living in these camps.
Exactly.
Where they're living virtually like, I dare say, Holocaust victims in some ways. You know, there are a lot of old world diseases that are proliferating in these camps, and they're not feeling like they're proper human beings, you know, they're not giving chances to do jobs and works.
Exactly, and this is a very good point you raised. The conditions are not very good in these camps either. Let's go to the next image, because I think it should be from one of, there we go, another headline. It says the Channel migrant dinghy tragedy, entirely predictable inquiry. Here's Cranston inquiry begins hearing. So this is the famous inquiry about this incident that's happened. There's been a huge upsurge in people taking rubber dinghies to cross the channel from France into the United Kingdom in search for a better life. So next slide, let's see.
But how is it
I wanted to get to, James, the individual who actually survived.
Okay.
Yeah, because there's a very important quote that he has where he talks about what exactly transpired on that night and what is a regular occurrence with these types of things. So if you would like to read the quote there.
So this chap says it was very cold, people were screaming, there was darkness all around, and he said we all thought we were dying. If rescue had come quickly, I believe half of these people would still be alive today. Now that's shocking, isn't it? We have been seen as refugees. You see, stigmas. That's the reason I believe the rescue did not come. We feel we are treated like animals. I could hear people crying, help me. I don't want to die. And that's from Issa Omar, who was one of the 2 survivors. So, you know...
2 out of 35, I believe
so
it was.
Bleak. And he witnessed all that, like the Titanic going down, people literally in the waters dying and screaming for help.
Literally like the Titanic. And if you have this, they actually found, when they looked through the phone records, that there was an individual who had a mobile phone, who picked up and called the Coast Guard on the French side, I believe it was, and they said, look, we are drowning, the water is very cold, there are women and children who are drowning in front of our eyes, please send for help. And they were told, quote, don't call here, don't call back. This was the response that was received and recorded and presented to the hearing of this inquiry.
That is shocking.
Blatantly underscoring what you said, that because these, and what Issa said there in that image that we showed you, that because they were refugees, they did not get the help that they needed, even though they had a cell phone with them and they made the call. Nobody came, or they said, don't call here. And then what happened is there was a huge delay in help arriving, and when help did ultimately arrive, they only searched for a couple of hours as they tried to see what they could salvage.
Resolved on the basis of another incident that was taking place.
Exactly.
And that had been resolved.
Yes, and that was the other thing. So the other line that was called told them, no, we've already taken care of it. So there was another boat that capsized where people were saved, 30 plus passengers, but in this one, almost everybody died except there were 2 survivors, and one of them bears witness to their treatment, and it was treatment worse than what you would expect to give to animals.
So there's no communication between these different groups who are dealing with this, and there's no due diligence to ensure that the matters have both been resolved. And when lives are at risk, how can you make shortcuts? You're making shortcuts. It's just not possible that you should be able to act like this.
Yes, it's a horrible incident and it's worthy of investigation. The investigation findings are going to be released very, very shortly. And again, this, like I said, it underscores the treatment of refugees. And this treatment of refugees is something that has changed over the course of time, particularly in the last 20 to 25 years, where the sentiment has radically shifted. And to discuss with us what is causing this shift in mindset, this attitude towards those people who are the most vulnerable in our society. We have with us coming Professor Razfar. And as we are talking to Professor Razfar, who is a professor of linguistics at the University of Illinois, we also have these quotes from the scriptures that tell us how we should be treating, if we are indeed a Christian nation or an Islamic or a Jewish nation, or indeed any nation that
we were
has...
all foreigners in the land once, you know, and everybody, as we know from the Bible, we talk about Joseph and Moses and Jesus, they were all refugees
all
in their
sages,
land.
prophets and saints are united on their opinion of the treatment of those people who are fleeing persecution, refugees and asylum seekers. And this is one of the things that they're all completely united on, aren't they, James? So we will also cover some of these amazing statements from the Gospels, from the Bible, and from the other religious and spiritual texts.
Messages.
So with that, we welcome on the show Professor Aria Razfar. Professor Razfar, welcome to Rise Up. Once again, it's great to have you back.
Great to be, excuse me, it's great to be here. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Assalamu alaikum, Professor Razfar. Good to hear from you.
Yes, we know it's very early for you there in Chicago, but you really did feel compelled to talk about a subject that is so prevalent in the news, that does cause so much divisiveness, that is such a hot topic. And I don't know if you're following that story that Brother James and I were just talking about, these rubber dinghies and the incredibly dangerous means of travel that people are willing to take on in order to seek a better life, and the treatment they receive is completely it's deplorable, it's horrible, it's treatment worse than you would treat animals.
Exactly.
Yes, there's no denying that, and one of the things that we've been emphasizing is the religious perspective as well as the humanitarian perspective. In fact, our religion is a humanitarian perspective.
Yes.
And I think the last thing I heard you guys talking about was about how all the archetypical characters of the Bible, the Jewish Bible, the Gospels, and even the Quran, the central characters are all refugees of some sort.
Exactly.
And not only were they refugees, they're refugees before they were born. So, which means that they did not have any national identity nowhere on this earth that accepted them as human beings. And I think this is one of the greatest litmus tests of our humanity and how humane we are. And so, is a direct reflection of how human we are. I mean, to put it simply, and I think this is something we need to talk about. We need to talk about it from both humanitarian perspective, but I think the religious perspective that we bring is also the most transcendent humanitarian perspective, because especially the idea that we have put forward regarding the refugee land idea, which is, you know, we have 45 million human beings that effectively are not counted as human beings anywhere on this earth today. For whatever reason. And all those reasons are invalid. And we are here to basically make that case that we cannot be in a world where 45 million people are not classified as people effectively. And not treated as human beings. And basically, all these tragedies that we're seeing across the world because these human beings are not classified as human beings, they're not being treated as human beings, do not belong under the auspices of any current nation state as it's constituted right now. And even in modern history, we can see sort of the burgeoning of this type of idea when, you know, in World War II, Jewish refugees notoriously were rejected at the borders of the United States. There's very famous examples of the St. Louis, which had It was a German ocean liner that had so many Jewish refugees, and they were basically rejected at the port. And the consequence of that is a stain on the national soul, if you will, of the United States.
It reflects the whole nationhood, doesn't it, when people act like this?
Yeah, how we treat refugees and what we do with people at the border, and we can see like this fervor is being fired up again right now. With how people are being taken from their homes. Graduate students are being taken from their homes and being sent away. And so this is a very tragic type of moment.
Yes, and we certainly don't want to go back to those dark times in our history that we shouldn't be very proud of at all. And it seems as though we are headed in that direction. And this is really a wake-up call for all the people who are listening to us in this moment in time. You spoke about, Professor, about the refugee land, which is a great solution to the problems that we just raised in terms of the treatment of these people who are fleeing from extremely horrific conditions in their homelands and trying to reach by any means necessary a sanctuary for themselves and their families. So if you could put into a nutshell the idea of the refugee land, which was proposed by the Raisa Rabasadiq for the benefit of the people, because it really is an ingenious solution to a huge problem.
Yeah, I mean, the premise is this, we are calling for, everyone to be treated humanely, without any precondition, where you're born, no matter what your religious affiliation, no matter what your sort of, whatever your earthly identities that have been ascribed to you are, before all of these things, a child of God. Right, and because of that, you have the right of dignity and a right to life and all these things, and we cannot dispose of people because fundamentally they're children of God. And so, if the world as it's currently constituted, as it's currently defined, with all its nation states and all these things, cannot accommodate the refugee, then let's make a place. If this is a problem for the rest of the world, it's not a problem for the people of God. In fact, God builds His nation historically, especially the God of the Bible, has built His messengers and His community through those who have been dispossessed and those who have been despised by the current world order. And so the godly perspective is to create a place for them, to make not only create a place for them, not just a marginal place, but a central place. They are the foundation of this nation. And I think one thing that was mentioned was that you can give us any land in the world. You can give us a land that is cold. You can give us a land that has no natural resources, and then people will see how God blesses it.
Yes.
It will become a proof upon the people.
It will become a paradise on earth. But even if the land didn't change, because the people have God in their hearts and they have that willpower that God grants them as a collective, that they would make it, and we will make it, a prosperous land. And that will be a testament to the fact that there is a man backed by God who's heading that project, and that the people behind him are completely dedicated to that goal of the wise. And the world will have to stand up and take notice, even if initially they do not recognise that. So I think that's a very important point, Professor, and I know that you're fully on board with this proposal of Rabasadiq and the fact that it's actually beginning to take fruition, and it's known by its seeds already through the prototype that we're establishing on the ground here already in the UK, and amassing together people from all different backgrounds, and many of them are classified as such, refugees, you might say. One question we had for you as well, Professor, we think is very important, and something I think that you've researched yourself, is the evolution of the mindset of the people today concerning, refugees, and how we go back to biblical times, and how people perceive these people as good people who had a lot to offer. As the Quran says, we made you different so you might come to know one another. So how is it to you that this evolution of the mindset for refugees has changed so dramatically, and how would you perceive that?
Well, I mean, the dehumanization of human beings, which is, I think, the root of this. There's a group of people that are outside their control. For example, religious beliefs or political views or wars or ethnic and tribal affiliations they become basically unwelcome in the place that they were born. And so they're forced to flee and they're forced to leave. And as a result, they become homeless. And now the question becomes, where can they live a life of dignity and, basically live as human beings as they were endowed by their creator. And so, the fact that there are so many refugees in modern times, 45 million is not a small number. And, they're basically, and these are all people who are educated. These are people who have skills. These are people who can make a valuable contribution to society. But
that's a critical point, Professor. That's such a critical point, that these people actually have got those skills. They have got those abilities. And by dehumanizing them and putting them into camps or whatever the situation, and not allowing them to practice those skills, it's actually very sad and actually is harming humanity. And people aren't realizing that, because they've been brandished refugee before doctor. But they're actually a doctor. They're not a refugee. They're a doctor who needs a place to practice.
Yes, I mean, it's almost as if God has in the heart and the body of the refugee His will. And when we reject the refugee, we're rejecting God. And so, it's not. I don't think it's a coincidence at all that our rejection of the refugee is also correlated with our rejection of God and God's people.
SubhanAllah.
And that's something we can see, that the rise of the refugee is also the rise of the darkness within the human soul.
Yeah.
And the converse is also true. So the more we embrace the refugee, because God is the God of the foreigner, the God of the refugee, the God of the fatherless and the widow, right? As the book, the Bible, when we reject the refugee, we are rejecting God. And so we see that, there's a direct correlation, or an inverse correlation of, so the more godly we are, the more we are with there would not be a refugee, right?
Exactly. That's a critical point.
And as our godliness decreases,
the numbers increase of refugees.
People also increases.
Yeah, exactly. It's a simple mathematical formula, really, which tells us about our position with God and how we love God and how we're working by God's principle.
So that's a clear reason, isn't it? This moving away from our moral compass, which comes from our religious sphere, which is that the treatment of the refugee is the way you would treat God.
Exactly, that hospitality that Irfan was mentioning earlier. And we know, and I know as a traveller myself, when I've travelled to far distant nations, sometimes the hospitality of the people is so overwhelming, and they don't look at you for your skin or your background or your affluence or what you might be able to benefit them. They just see you as a neighbour who they can embrace, and that warmth is a wonderful feeling. And by doing that, we all benefit one another. I don't see why it should cause any harm. Like the envoy for King Negus, and how he embraced the Muslim envoy who were abandoned, rejected by the Qurayshi. They went to Negus in Abyssinia, and he welcomed them with open arms and said, "You stay as long as you want. You are my brothers in faith."
Yes.
And at least, as Imam Ali said, even if you're not brothers in faith, you're brothers in humanity. So why not go back to that core principle? And that's why Abu Sadiq's revolution is having a massive impact. And the timing is abundantly clear that it's a good time now, because these people, they need their messenger now.
Yeah, absolutely. And the professor was talking about within the religious sphere. If you look into it, the treatment of the refugee is actually emphasized over and over again and repeatedly as the way you would treat a refugee. I mean, what do we say when we say, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim"? We seek refuge in Allah from the accursed devil. It's there throughout all religions.
Refuge.
And like you said, all of these archetypal figures within religion were all at some point refugees in their lives.
Yeah.
Whether it was from the birth, the growing up, or in the later stages of their life.
Moses was a refugee, from birth, wasn't he? When he was taken in the basket and he was brought up in the lap of the Pharaoh, in the belly of the beast.
Yes.
And you could argue the same for the rise of the Pharaoh Muhammad today, brought up in the belly of the beast in America.
Yes.
And, the Son of Man, he does not have a home. Like the foxes have dens and the birds have nests.
It's right
the Son of Man does not have a home.
Does not.
And if Abu Sadiq is representative of that archetype today, then are we not, if we follow him? So where is that home? Where is that nest?
Yeah, Professor Razfar said something really interesting. He said this is happening, this shift in sentiment towards the refugee and the asylum seeker is happening because of this process of dehumanization, and this happened very recently in history as well. And I wanted to read a very interesting quote, Professor, from a lady who is now 100 years old. Actually, she gave this speech in the European Parliament in 2022, and it became, I think it has lots of insights in it. She said, her name is Margot Friedlander. So she said, "Be human. People did what they did because they did not recognize people as people. Everyone deserves to be respected. There is no Christian blood, no Jewish blood, no Muslim blood. There is only human blood. We are all the same. What happened, happened. We can no longer change it. It must only never, ever happen again." So this is from a Holocaust survivor who is now 100 years old, and she gave this speech at the European Parliament in 2022. And I think there is a lot in there, isn't there, in terms of the main method by which people have become so apathetic to the needs of these extremely desperate people.
Tolerance and apathy. Apathy, the last signs of a dying society. So all societies around the world, in evidence of that, are dying before us now.
Yeah. What did you make of that quote, Professor?
Yes, there's a lot of quotes like that from Holocaust survivors, especially the ones who have been able to overcome the traumatic experience. And what I mean by that is they've become empowered through their refugee experience, because basically you have two choices when you're put under that kind of pressure. Either you reject God and you think there is no God, or your faith becomes completed.
Right.
And quotes like that are indicative of a person who has been able to basically climb the ladder of faith and really move all the way up to this sort of this deep, altruistic, empathetic type of consciousness, which is really the goal of the real religions, and yes, the goal of the wise. And I think human beings, it's not even enough to be tolerated or respected. I mean, really, the standard here is to be loved as yourself, to be completely selfless, and this is the ultimate goal. I mean, when you look at whether the Eastern religions, you have the concept of ahimsa, which is this negation of the self and loving the other as yourself. And so, as we were talking about earlier, the way you treat the other, the so-called other, is a direct reflection of how conscious you are of the true purpose and how conscious you are of the divine. And so we have to be very wary of that and very and try to move in the direction that this quote represents, which is not just to be tolerated as a human being, not even respected enough, but to be loved.
Yes.
And to be loved without any condition, unconditional love. And that's the true humanity, which is embodied by this selfless love, which I believe the refugee land concept is echoing. And it's based on that type of standard, that a person who becomes a citizen of refugee land will not only feel like they're being tolerated or even respected, but they're being loved without condition. And this is the ultimate barometer of a divine just state.
Yes, subhanAllah. Beautifully said, very poetically said as well, Professor.
It is. You've really raised the banner very high there with that statement, and that is the banner. That is why the people are going out there on the streets and doing these missionary works and raising that banner high, irrespective of the consequences, because they don't fear from the oppressor when they embody that spirit of selflessness. And we have many verses that we can mention pertaining to this, which really cement this point, Professor, that you've said that love conquers all evil.
Yes, this is the selfless love. This is the banner of selfless love that we're propagating, and how can you go against it? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good question, and it's a rhetorical question because there is no way to go against it. And we've seen, as members of this fledgling religion of the Seventh Covenant that promises mankind a new beginning and a new chance to build that ideal state that the great philosophers and sages spoke about, called the divine just state, the kingdom of heaven on earth. And this is something that is going to be possible and made possible with that kind of an attitude where we see the other as a manifestation of God in the creation, in the sense that this is an individual who is a reflection of that Almighty God that gave us everything that we have, and therefore it is our obligation, it is our divine duty to meet their needs, to help them in whatever way we can, and to provide for them a safe sanctuary and a refuge.
It becomes truly empathic, because you actually feel, if you can try and feel their pain and know what suffering they've been through because maybe you've experienced it, or just because you know God wants that from you, then you will embrace that person and you will try and give them everything that you have. And Abu Sadiq has said, and Ahmad al-Hassan has said, that the divine just state will not be established until we work by that principle within ourselves, within our families, our extended communities, and that is the goal of the wise. And by doing that, then this mission becomes a blessing and an Eden on earth. And that is the goal, isn't it, really? To establish this Eden-like state on earth where we live harmoniously, and as Professor Razfar clearly said, unconditional love, where we help the other as much as ourselves, in order that we have that harmony amongst the humanity in the state.
Okay, that's great. Professor Razfar, if you have any closing words for us on this very important topic, the topic of providing refuge to the refugee, then please do so. I think we have also these scriptural quotes coming up to remind people of what the prophets and the messengers said and what God himself stated about the importance of prioritizing the needs of those people who are the most vulnerable in society. And I think nobody comes more in that bracket than the refugee.
Exactly.
I look forward to hearing the continued conversation, and God bless you all, and may this refugee land become a reality soon.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you, Professor. Lovely to hear your voice and your feedback. It's very beautiful. Thank you.
So, James, you've been scouring all the different religions and world traditions to try and find these quotes where God and his messengers speak about the importance of taking care of those fleeing persecution and how important of a religious obligation
Pearls
this
of
is.
humanity, and they just emphasize what Professor Razfar said, so it's beautiful he said it first, and they really are proclaiming humanity before anything, and the scripture is there to put humanity first in a practical sense. So it'd be lovely to see some of these quotes, if we can, up on the screen, and we can discuss them with the audience. If we have those. Oh yeah. So,
where are we going first? We're going to the book of Deuteronomy, James.
Book of Deuteronomy.
What have you got for us?
From the Torah, from the Kings and the Bible. He defends the cause of the fatherless and the widow and loves the foreigner residing among you. The foreigners residing with you, giving them food and clothing, and you are to love those who are foreigners, for you yourselves were foreigners in Egypt.
Yeah, can't say any more clearly than that.
Direct message to Bani Israel, but also to humanity themselves.
Yes.
You were foreigners, you were rejected, you were outcasts.
Yeah.
So how are you going to treat the people now when you're tested? It's a great test from God.
And to be fair, some of these countries that were formerly really Christian countries have provided safe haven for the members of our religion.
Yeah, today. That's a beautiful thing how we see members of Greece,
yes,
Latvia and other nations have provided refuge. And Spain for the 104, and hence we see the brothers going out in Zaragoza today because they have been provided that refuge. So there is hope in these nations, but in actual essence, the refugee state is to bring them all together as one.
Should we go to our next slide?
Yes. It'd be good to see.
There we go.
So do not forget to... So this is in the book of Hebrews, once again from the Bible. Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers. For by doing so, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it.
Wow. That's beautiful.
And angels, as we know in Greek, is messengers. Yeah. So you're helping, and subhanallah, when we reflect on that, like the apostles were going out two by two. If you met one of those apostles and welcomed him into your house when he gave you the message and the glad tidings, like Muhammad Amin in Belgrade, then you're welcoming God and his angels into your house.
SubhanAllah, you're welcoming the messengers of God into your house.
Like Prophet Lut. What did they do instead?
That example may not be the pertinent one in this case, because that had bad repercussions. But what we're talking about is when you open your doors for these people fleeing extreme, unimaginable persecution, you open the door for one of the messengers or angels of God. And now, like we saw in Spain, the sharing of the message of the coming of the Messiah and the establishment of the divine just state. I mean, no country in Europe, even though we have relative poverty, this concept exists, but no one in the world is truly free. And we know that even in wealthier countries, for example, the American dream quickly turns into a nightmare for many people who seek it, because the way the world is wired right now, it is there to tend to the needs of a very small minority, and the majority suffers. So beautiful quote there.
That's a lovely quote.
And it's perfectly reflected, because now these messengers of light, these angels who have been allowed to come in, are spreading the works of God within that community.
And subhanAllah, we see that with the refugees from our religion going out there, and they are acting like that. So when you welcome them and you give them support, then you are welcoming a messenger of God into your home. So, and then by doing that, you become a messenger as well. And just like the migrants of Muhammad when they went to Medina, and they were welcomed by a small group in Yathrib, and they also became messengers and returned with Prophet Muhammad to Mecca. So, that community builds in that fashion.
Have you got any more quotes for us?
I think we have.
I'm excited to read them.
Maybe we have one from the East, perhaps. Yes, I hope we did.
There we go.
So this is from the East.
The year of unification. We've got to represent everybody.
Yeah, year of unification. We're bringing together for East meets West. And,
tell us about this one, James.
So this is from the Vedic text, and I think this is very beautiful. Let us have concord. Have unity with our own people, and concord and unity, as it would say, with people who are strangers to us. And subhanAllah, Islam began as something strange, blessings to the strangers. Create between us and the strangers a unity of hearts.
That's beautiful.
So we have to have concord with the people. We have to have concord with people from different backgrounds. And we do that through the hearts, and that means coming together as one and recognizing any differences we have as an opportunity to embrace different cultures, different skill sets. And you gain, you don't lose. You gain a friend, you gain a support, whether it's in social ways or economic ways. And God grants that when you open your heart to that foreign and stranger, you gain a lot more.
Yeah, and by the way, this is a really important point before we go into more quotes. Now, really contemplate on this, because Professor Razfar really did say something extremely important for us to contemplate on. He said that, Abu Sadiq said, that if you can give us any part on the earth, we don't care if it's in the extreme north or in the extreme south or somewhere on a deserted desert island. We will accept anything, because we know that the grace of God will come upon us, because we are the people of God in this time, and it will be a proof upon the people.
Yes, and do you know what makes me reflect? Because back in Rome, they built a huge empire, from east to west, and they were destroyed in the end because at the Danube, people were coming in on boats and were not being accepted, and they were drowning, and it led to a war and an incursion and the collapse of the state. But what did they not have? That binding glue. They did not have the grace of God, because they did not have a messenger from God overhanging that state. And so even if they built a huge empire, it collapsed because they did not have the grace of God.
Exactly. So now this is the thing, isn't it? So you will see barakah, or blessings, coming upon you if you're doing it for the right reasons. If you're doing it to help another human being, you're actually doing yourself a favor. And if you do not do it, then we believe in the law of karma. Perhaps a future incarnation, you might be in the same spot as this individual. But if you showed love and compassion, then love and compassion will return to you. And if you turn away cold-heartedly, then perhaps you will have to endure the consequences of your choices as well.
I dare say with Jacob, I think there was a wayfarer or stranger that came to his house, and perhaps he turned him away at that time. And as a result of that, he went through many traumas and karmic traumas. But because he's a man of God, he had to go through that in order to rebalance that karma. And then he was able to go to Egypt with the brothers.
That's a very great example.
But he turned away a wayfarer and when he had a banquet. And he faced the consequences of losing his son, his beloved son, for many years because of that.
Exactly.
And that's a man of God. So it's a warning to all of us, whether you're a man of God, whether you're just a regular human being, because ultimately we are all men of God and Adamites if we believe in God. So let's be careful who we turn away, and it may be that person is sent by God to test you in your humanity, because you proclaim to be a man of the Scripture, a man of the book. But are you a human being first and foremost? And if not, then the Scripture only fell on your tongue, and that's a worry.
Did indeed. And do we have any more? Have you got any more lined up for us, James?
I'm not sure if I remember if we had another. I think there's another one,
There's one
I think
more,
we have more, maybe from the ancient Greeks, perhaps.
Okay.
Because they obviously had some glad tidings for us as well. So perhaps we can see that one. And yes, this is from Plato, who we know was the successor of Socrates. And so for the ancient Greeks, they would say our dealings with foreigners, both at home and abroad, should not be churlish, but courteous and hospitable. So courteous, obviously, that we mind our manners, we treat them as ourselves, and hospitable, we welcome them in and give them as much as we have from our own selves, whether it's food, clothing, or accommodation.
And this is a quote from Plato.
This is Plato. So whether it's, in the Republic, so Plato is emphasizing that, and that's how they were building that ideal state. That template that you talked about from Socrates was based on people coming together from all backgrounds to build that. And they failed because of the likes of Pericles. When they let foreigners in, they treated them like Chantal. And they ended up having plagues and much sufferings because of the way they treated the foreigner in ancient Athens. And you can research that if you don't have that knowledge from Pericles. That was horrendous.
Yep, exactly. And any more great thinkers quotes? I think we have a few more.
Let's see if we've got some more.
There we go.
And a beautiful one from Prophet Muhammad. And I think this one was found by you, Doctor, and I thought it was very beautiful. One of the best. Whoever shows kindness to the foreigner and the refugee, I will intercede for him on the day of judgment. And that is from the Sunni narration books, I think.
Doesn't get any clearer than that, right?
No.
So
show kindness to the foreigner and the refugee. And so Prophet Muhammad is basically saying, if you help the other, I will help you.
On the Day of Judgment, when it matters most.
When it matters most. So just follow that principle. And yet we don't see that in the Muslim, Jewish and Christian nations today. In fact, not only do we not see that, we see the direct opposite attitude. So this is disturbing beyond disturbing, because it means that people have forgotten the true essence of religion.
Yes.
And that is why to enable them to get back to that reality, we need the messenger of God in our time who is restoring that humanity.
Yes. And let's close off the show with one more verse, and then James, have the final word, and you can close off the show.
So finally we go to another verse proclaimed by Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, where he said, and if any of the polytheists seek your protection, then grant him protection so that he may hear the words of God. Then deliver him to his place of safety. That is because they are a people who do not know. So, subhanAllah, we do not treat people who are not even monotheists.
Even people who are disbelievers, who are completely against your creed. The Quran is saying in Surah At-Tawbah, open your gates to these people. Give them a good representation of your faith. Be generous and kind to them so that they may be attracted towards the truth that you have.
And Prophet Muhammad would do this, and people would believe in Prophet Muhammad based on his morals and manners. When people say, I'm leaving the city because I heard someone's coming to this city who's preaching a word that is causing disparity.
Yes.
And then she said his name is Muhammad. This man helped her. He helped her leave the city. He was carrying her luggage. She said, you're such a lovely man. She said, I'm Prophet Muhammad. And she embraced the religion at that moment.
There you go.
So people embrace the religion through the hospitality and the manners, and through the treatment of refugees is paramount.
So let's revive spirituality and religion in our lives. Let's put xenophobia aside. Let's really help the other. Let's see the other as an extension of our own self. How would you like to be treated when you are in the same situation? Would you like to be left there drowning in a cold sea as there is no help on the horizon? Or would you have somebody rescue you and give you a place of safety and sanctuary so that your family can live dignified lives? If this is what you want for yourself, then desire it for your brother, and we will have the divine just state. Thank you very much for joining us today, James. It was a true honor to discuss such an important topic, a really big problem that is become a crisis in this day and age, and we have to talk about it, and we have to discuss solutions, and the best solution has been given by the riser of the family of Muhammad, Abu as-Sadiq, who says that we should build a refugee land. Is there anybody that will extend a hand and take that first step towards helping these millions upon millions of displaced people who have nowhere to go and live lives in peace and security? This is the challenge that has now been held up to mankind. Will mankind respond, or will it repeat the mistakes of yesteryear and create more suffering? Thank you very much for joining us today on Rise Up. We'll be back again tomorrow at 10 a.m. Until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.